Okay, it's 6 p.m. I'm going to call this meeting to order, beginning with
30.
I'm sorry, 5:30 p.m. Beginning with roll call.
Christina Walu Reynolds.
Nicole Villanueva.
Frank Wagner.
Margaret Beck.
Sellergren.
Andrew Lewis.
Deanna Thoman.
Sork.
All right. Item C, public discussion of anything that is not on the agenda. All right, moving on to item D, certificate of appropriateness for 738 Oakland Avenue.
Okay, just so you guys are aware, sometimes when we have projects where we expect to be able to approve them because we've approved similar projects in the same way, but they're not yet a staff approvable item. Sometimes if we have a busy agenda, we put them in the beginning, kind of like council does, as a consent agenda item. And when we have those, I'll put them under a separate heading, and when we come to the meeting, I won't present them. You will have had to have read the staff report to have any information about it. And then we will vote on it, unless you have any questions. And so all we'll do at the meeting is say we have this consent agenda item. Anybody have any questions? We'll go right to the recommended motion. You'll make a motion, discuss, and vote. This item is one that I would have done that way, but since a lot of you are new and Jordan is a newer chair, I thought I would explain that first. So in the future, you might have some, and that way we can just get through them quicker if we need to.
Okay.
So anyway, this property is in the Longfellow Historic District. It is this 4-square house that you see here. And the project is to put a basement egress window. And the reason it's not a staff approvable project is because of the location of the egress window. We want it towards the back of the house or on the back of the house. And so they have proposed that the egress window would go here because that's where they're putting the bedroom, in the basement. This is the existing window behind this shrub, and they would install what we typically recommend, which is a casement window that on the top of it looks like the existing basement windows. It has a mutton bar across the middle so that it looks like a double hung window from the outside. And then in addition to that, the window well itself will be a material that matches the foundation. In this case, we have a stucco coated foundation. They will do that. There hopefully won't be very much of it that protrudes above ground. If they want to work with us to do some other material to cap that, we will work with them on that. Some kind of a brick or stone cap, something like that. So that is the project. Carl Brown has arrived. The guidelines basically talk about if new window wells are required, the materials used must appear similar to the existing foundation, which is what I was just mentioning. Adding windows that match the type, size, sash width, trim, use of divided lights, and overall appearance. Basically, the key here is that we're just replacing an existing window. We're keeping the window opening the same width. We're keeping the head of the window at the same location as the existing head, and we're just dropping the sill of that window to make it an accessible sized opening. And so the recommended motion for this project is to approve the certificate of appropriateness as presented in the staff report with the following condition: the window sashes are black. That is something that we recommend anytime we're using a metal-clad window, since it's not as easily paintable as wood. In this case, the existing sash is black as well, but the window that they presented to us is actually a white aluminum instead. So staff would recommend that that little change is made.
Great. Would somebody make a motion, please?
Wagner moves to approve a certificate of appropriateness for the project at 738 Oakland Avenue as presented in the staff report with the following conditions. The window sashes are black.
So in this case, do we still do commission discussion?
We need a second first.
Oh.
Stork seconds.
Yeah.
In a case
Yeah,
like
and
this, would we-
we're just doing this one like normal.
Okay,
So you can discuss and ask questions and all of that.
Okay, clarifying questions. I suppose, is that, I'm sorry, I know the order is always screwed up. Clarifying questions come before the motion is the initial motion.
Yeah, typically, but, it doesn't matter too much. Yeah, generally, I'll present it. If you guys have any questions, ask me, and then we would let the owner speak if they were here. I don't believe they are. And then anyone from the public, and at some point after those people speak, then you would make your motion.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because once you make the motion, you should not continue to have conversation with the public unless we go back to try to alter something to make it approvable or something and need to have a conversation with them.
I do have a question. So in my mind, I'm picturing what I've seen on other houses for an egress window where there is kind of a galvanized steel dome that is set into the ground. Is that how this would be, or would it be block maybe?
Right, that's the portion of the guidelines here that we require that it matches the foundation. So we actually cannot ever approve the galvanized steel window wells. So yeah, it could be either poured concrete or concrete block in this case because it would be coated in stucco to match the foundation. And that's why you can see here that there is some stucco on the foundation. That's why if they want to put a cap of some other material on it, we would appreciate that and work with them to come up with something. This house doesn't really have much exposed masonry, so, a little brick edge would be fine or whatever, something that is easy but still historic.
Good.
So those of us that aren't super savvy, you're saying a casement window is used here instead of an egress?
Instead of a double hung window.
Instead of a double hung.
And it's because an egress window has to have a certain dimension of opening. It's kind of to get, the fire
Right.
department person with their oxygen tank through the window. And usually, unless it's a large double hung window, it won't provide that size. And so a casement window, when it opens fully, can provide that size space. And so it's very typical for us to approve a casement window. And then we have the mutton bars, like you see here, these three added to it so that from the outside, it appears like a double hung window. Obviously, when it's open, it won't. It will look like a casement, but this is a typical thing. And it's actually something I believe that the National Park Service prescribes as well.
I think it's 5.75 square feet of opening. That's the minimum.
Yeah.
So is there still a portion under the ground or below the soil level?
And that's why the window well will be required. So
Okay.
if we go, nope, wrong way.
Same
So if we
height.
look here, basically their new window will fit this head location and it'll be the same width. The sill will drop below ground in order to have enough space to get the right sized casement window. And the reason the window well is then required is because, you need to hold back the ground. And the window well has a required dimension as well. I think it has to be like 3 feet by, I don't know, maybe it's 3 by 3, something like that. And it's best also then, since it's holding back the earth and would collect water, that they put a drain pipe in it as well. They don't always do that.
So that's pretty significant alteration in this sense.
It'll basically double the height of the existing window. And it will actually add that foundation, kind of like bump out. It will.
All right. Then now we
other questions?
make an additional. Do we have any other questions?
Nope.
No further discussion. So we vote.
Yep.
Okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
opposed?
Any against? Any opposed?
Nope.
All right. Great. Item 2, 811 East College Street.
811 East College Street is this property here in the College Green Historic District. It's a key property. It has always been considered individually eligible for the National Register or for local landmark status. It is the historic Rohrbacher Sanitarium. Yeah, it was built in 1927. Dr. Rohrbacher actually had another large house on that property that he used for a long time. And then he built this building, and that house was dismantled, and quite a few trim details and other things, elements of that house were used in this building as well. This is the front image of it. It went through a major rehab by Mark McCallum quite a few years ago. So that it is now apartments. It does have a building, and I'll show you photos later, in the rear. And that building, I believe, used to be a garage. It also had a large boiler that heated the entire property. So the boiler was kind of like remote in the garage. This project is the installation of mini splits for air conditioning, and mini splits require a mechanical permit and therefore historic review. This project was completed at some point in the past, and I had quite a few people from the public who notified me that it had been done to basically complain about the work without a permit. This is an image just from Google from 2022 that shows some of the piping. So we have piping, the mini splits sit on the roof, the piping travels down the face of the building in these locations, and it was white at this time. This is the north front face of the building, the north face of the wing to the side, and here it shows them as well. This one enters in basically the decorative lintel above this window. This one penetrates right through the decorative arch above this window as well. If we go back to I can't see, you'll see it in another image, but this roof basically has big scuppers that take the water and channel it into a downspout, and they're all located on the far east side of the building. So that's kind of where at least the builders of the building considered like the less public side, and that's where the parking is as well. Since then, so we had our intern go out and take some photos, and since then we have noticed that the painting has been painted red. These arrows just point out where the piping is. Here's one of those scuppers and the downspout that comes from it. So again, we have the north side, a little bit of the east side of the front bay, a little bit of the east side of the building here. And then we can see around on the west side, we have some as well, and they have been painted red. So when this project was reported to us, we reached out to the owner back in July of 2022. And we tried to contact them about several things. In the meantime, they had another project on another building that we worked through, and all the time trying to communicate about this building. And finally, in January 6th of 2023, they submitted an application for the project. And we provided a comment about the fact that our opinion was that this piping did impact the historic character of the building. And we didn't get any response, and we had been working with one of the owners. And then in July of this year, they reached out and said that no, the other owner is the person in charge. And so we wrote to them and did not receive a response as well, until we decided that we just needed to get the project over with and reviewed, and told them that we were going to put it on the agenda. And then they reached out. They provided us with a letter that talked about the need for the mini split system to remove the exterior air conditioning units, which we agree with. Getting rid of those is going to help not damage the building. And there was never any question about whether or not something like this could be done. It's just the fact that we would work with them to make sure that the location of the piping was appropriate. For instance, there is a house in Manville Heights that's a local landmark, and before it was landmarked, the owner installed mini splits for the whole house, and there's absolutely no exterior piping on that project. All of the mini splits are located in a place where they ran the piping down through chases they made in the backs of closets. They made soffits at some points in time to run it horizontally through the house. Typically, in a project like this, if the owner had reached out, we would work with them and their HVAC contractor to come up with a plan of how to do that kind of work. Our recommendation would be that piping that's exposed should be on the exterior or not on the front face of the building. It should not ever penetrate any architectural details, and it should always be painted to blend with the building. If the units were visible, they would be screened as well. Here's the south or back side of the property with some of the piping. And then this is that extra building in the back. It's a building that has shake shingle siding on the top half and brick on the bottom half. So our guidelines do not talk about piping per se. So this is one of those areas where we look to the Secretary of the Interior standards, and there are 4 standards that are related to this. The first one is Standard 2. The historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alteration of features and spaces that characterize a property shall be avoided. So you would not put piping right through an important detail because you should avoid altering those aspects of the building. Distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques are examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property shall be preserved. A similar sentiment there. New additions, such as piping, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. And new additions and adjacent or related new construction shall be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. So, in addition to that, we have a radon installation type of project that has been approved for staff review so that they don't need to come to the commission. And they are approved through staff review if they meet specific conditions. And the conditions that could be considered a template for reviewing this type of project include the fact that the system is on a non-street facing elevation and located on the rear of the property if possible, and then of course the exposed PVC pipe is painted to match the structure. Currently on this project, the staff recommendation is that any piping on the north wall of the building and each side of that front projecting bay is relocated. Any additional piping is painted to blend with the building behind. Any damage to the brick building caused by the project is repaired with matching brick and mortar so that it is not visible. I lost my train of thought.
This has never happened since I
lot.
started.
Could you show us
I
a
know.
picture of that first item? No, back where the piping on the front face and then it's on either side of the bay? I'm just going to see what that looks like.
Yeah, so,
Or that's not the front, that's the west side of the building.
yeah, this is one of the sides of that front-facing bay.
Got it.
And then this piping in this area is what we'd be talking about. Now, the initial recommendation from staff was, okay, put it through the roof, run it straight down through a chase. They did respond that both their HVAC installer and their roofer don't think that's a viable option. Okay, then we would work through an alternate option, because there are other options. I would propose that you could go in that east side and go laterally and make a soffit. You're talking about a soffit that's like this big. You're not talking about a large soffit that you would use for modern ductwork. Similarly, they can run vertically in the building. You could go in at the lower level and run up the building. And the soffits that I have seen, or the chases that I've seen people construct in closets, again, you're taking out like 6 to 8 inches of the back of your closet to run that kind of piping. It's not a significant thing. It does require work. You must then finish that like a wall or a ceiling or whatever it is, but it does preserve the exterior of the building. And so if you were to approve the recommendation as staff has stated it, that would involve the fact that the owner would need to work with staff on this, which they have not worked with us in any way on this project whatsoever to this point. And so that would be a requirement. They would have to do that as well. The alternative would be if the commission felt that it was appropriate to just leave them painted as they are. And that is another thing that you could decide to approve as well.
Is that paint, would you consider that matching?
I consider it red.
Okay.
And especially if it's the same color used on the back building. That building's not red.
Do you think it's matching?
Me?
I haven't looked at it recently in good enough light to
Sure.
look.
I mean, it looks like a different color, but I mean, not wildly so. I just wanted to know what we considered to be, like, what is the actual distinction between, like, matching and not matching? I don't know if it super matters in this instance.
Brick does have a depth of color and some variation in color, and so, yeah, it can be difficult to match as well.
All right. Do we have any members of the public who would have any questions or?
I'd like to speak. I'm the owner.
Sure.
You'll just need to come up and speak into the microphone and sign in as well, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll sign in quickly.
And if you want me to show any certain photos, let me know.
Sure. So I am Barry Westermeyer. My wife and I both own it together. I'm the owner that is the secondary owner that was referred. And I look at it from the standpoint of, and I understand ignorance is no way to work through this, but on the other hand, we were working it from the front side. First off, when we bought the building, I believe every spring and every fall, and I'm just giving a little bit of background, as far as particularly aesthetics, I installed and uninstalled 15 window units that mounted to custom-made storm windows that were destroying those storm windows. Also, the effervescence or the condensation was running off, which we ended up spending, to tuck point that building, we ended up spending, I think, close to $15,000 from the damage that had part of that was from that. So we were really kind of backing into this. I was working with a credible local contractor. I talked to him. We just basically went at it from the front side. He had no idea. He did not, and he was still a little mystified. We ended up, we didn't know it needed to be permitted. We ended up getting it permitted. It was permitted, and we paid that fee, which I don't know. I can't remember the total exactly, but
I don't know.
It was substantial. It was thousands of dollars to permit this job. Whoops, sorry. And once again, not to not respond, but basically I've been trying to backwards engineer this, I guess, to a certain extent. Our HVAC guy, he would never go through the roof. He never suggested that. Our roofing contractor said that is not an option. It voids the warranty of that roof. It's kind of a complex, it's not necessarily a flat roof. There's some interesting trusses in how water moves to the sculptures on the east side. And quite frankly, our HVAC person, he thought it was most viable because we are getting the cartridges on the inside to bedrooms in particular, bedrooms or living rooms. And that's where we were removing window units from as well. And I go back to, once again, ignorance is not the excuse here, but from the standpoint of I didn't know the fine details of the historic benefits that are derived and had to be concisely followed. But we were also looking at it from the standpoint of not only the window air conditioners, the boiler was contained in the basement of what we call the carriage house. That's what Dr. Rohrabacher called it, the carriage house. It was no longer viable. It was no longer, because it was a steam system, it was actually, that unit was damaging the main building in particular, from steam hammers, water hammers. We were losing plaster. We had all sorts of issues based upon that unit. So we were in a bit of a time crunch to get this resolved because we were not going to have that boiler unit for the winter of 2022-23. And so, once again, none of these are excuses. I'm just giving you the background and what we, now, I will say, when you were asking about color, we matched the original color of the downspouts. That's what we made the assumption with the color. And that was meant to be done when we had a lift on the premises, redoing all the windows with paint. It didn't get done by the time we ran out of that particular piece of equipment, and then we ended up having to do it with ladders. So that's a little bit of the background. If you have any questions of me, please feel free. And now, can I interject one more thing? Mm-hmm. From an ownership standpoint too, and I know, I just want to interject that my wife and I have owned this building for over a decade now. We continue to make improvements. We want that building to be the best building that it can be. It's a rental property, but we try very hard to attract, whether we have several retirees, we have young professionals, we have grad students. We try to, not to say that this is right, wrong, or indifferent, we try to avoid undergrads. We have quiet hours during that, after 11 o'clock in that building. One of our tenants is a master gardener. If you were to go, notice in the backyard, we can't really tell because it's the wintertime. We take great pride in the grounds of that building. So none of this was done to cheapen. It's a building that we take a lot of pride in and we put a lot of work into. And I'm there, quite frankly, 4 or 5 days a week, either doing work, working for tenants, yard work, maintenance, and things like that. So it's not an absentee landlord situation either. We live here locally. I've been in business here since 1996. So that's a little bit of our background, and my wife similarly was in business since 2004 in this. And so we've done a lot with this property and take a lot of pride in this property. So things weren't done to end run anything. We were just trying to, I guess, keep the value of that building and the integrity of that building via the HVAC system. And so that's how it all came about. Any questions?
I'll say it's a gorgeous structure, and thank you for maintaining it. That's a big job. I'm curious, when you did decide to do the HVAC system to this newer way, did you hear anything about putting lines through the roof, that being an option? Was that ever presented?
It was discussed with our HVAC contractor, and he just And then he referred me to our roof, the person that did the roof, and he said the roof would be, the warranty would be voided.
Okay.
And he just, because it's, like I said, it's very interesting how it's constructed up there. It's not a true flat roof. And then it has a membrane over the top of it, and then it also has closed cell foam and with a coating over the top of that. And so to be able to get through that and then into, it's almost like there's a mini truss system up there that moves the water and ramps it to the sculptures on the east side. So coming through the roof was going to be very complex,
Okay.
almost undoable based upon their opinions.
Jessica, could you go back to the staff motion?
Uh-oh.
Because I wonder if what you're describing, is there a way for you to adjust this so that it would meet the guidelines for approval? I mean, I'm reading this motion and I'm listening to your description of what you've tried and what seemed to be unfeasible. So I guess what I'd like to clarify, is it possible for you to meet the guidelines here?
From the standpoint of
Yeah, I mean, so, yeah,
we would
exactly.
then, we would, to go back, the, what they call them the line sets. So the line sets that go into each cartridge, into the bedrooms and into, they would have to be torn off the front, torn off the bay portion on the west side. They would have to be rerouted back over the back side or the east side. And then, so this is not, this building on the inside standpoint, it's not like there are exact apartments stacked on one another. Every apartment is different. There's not one apartment that's the same throughout the entire place. So when you're talking about being able to move through those places, find places in closets, there's some of the places, I mean, the closets are half the size of this podium. So, and then to be able to hang cartridges in the proper space to both air condition and heat those spaces, that was the challenge that we faced, and that's why they were placed where they were placed, for optimization. So, and that's coming from a layman. I know enough from research to know enough, and that's about it. But that's how, and also, and I'll be very honest from the standpoint of, and I've had this discussion from a retro standpoint with my HVAC contractor. Cost was a consideration as well. By the time that system was put in and wired and everything, it was a six-figure system. It was not inexpensively done. So once again, it's not a $115 window air conditioner hanging out of the window all summer. It's a very expensive system.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to hear your explanation.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Margaret,
I'm sorry if I babbled on there.
it's my understanding that we don't have any guidelines for mini splits in piping. Did I misunderstand that?
We don't have specific guidelines for those. We have the Secretary of the Interior standards that we
Are
use.
those ours?
Those are the basis, yes.
Should we cite?
Our guidelines do cite them. That's what we use when we don't have specific guidelines for a topic.
It's kind of a default.
Yeah, and that's what the basis for our guidelines is anyway.
When you have relocated here, do you, like, in your opinion for that word, do you mean like get them on other sides of the building? Or you're saying we could do things that could leave them on the front, but they would hide them a little bit better, or?
No, the staff recommendation would remove the piping from at least those locations. And yeah, it would come in on either the south
Okay, so
or
it
the
is-
east side or the west side. And then if we can't travel, I mean, vertically, obviously, we wouldn't need to. So then it would be a matter of making a soffit and traveling horizontally at the roof level or the ceiling level in each floor.
I'm interested in how, like, to what degree historic preservation staff would be able to, like, provide guidance there, because I know as a layperson in this project, you know, had you spoken with Jessica initially, you know, you may have received the help you needed to do it, you know, according to
And once
the
again,
Secretary of
my
Interior
jumping off
guidelines.
point was with my contractor. He had no idea that it was a permitted job. It had to be a permitted job.
Okay.
And this is a person that's pretty substantial. He does a lot of work in Iowa City. It's the first time that he has ever had to permit a mini split system. And that's why, to your point, he said he has never, and he's put them in commercial buildings since, and he's never had an issue since. So that's where the, obviously the ball was dropped, but it wasn't an intention to mislead or to, and quite frankly, I've been trying to figure out options and running into dead ends once again, because if we do have to start pulling all these line sets, first off, it's seasonal sensitive because these people will be without, and it'll be a substantial time. The install was probably over 2 months. And so by the time you start pulling lines out, which is both their heat and their air conditioning, and then trying to find ways to come back into the building, going through other people's apartments, and that will have to happen.
Well, I would think you would go one by one.
You still have to go through other people's apartments to get to those front apartments.
So in 2016, a sorority on the corner of Burlington and Dodge, they were going to put in this kind of system, and the contractor knew that these do require permits across the city always. So anytime he is doing that he's working without a permit, you just might want to let him know.
Right, and I'm not going to, I mean, I've...
But with that project, that contractor did reach out to staff, and so we worked with them about where they would go on the outside, where the piping would run. We reviewed the location of the things on the inside just so that we could verify locations of piping on the outside. That's why staff has architectural training, is to be able to work through things like this. So we would work, obviously the owner would be in that conversation, but that's the kind of project where we would typically work with the contractor. Contractors who do this type of work often want to do it in the easiest way possible because it's easiest for everyone, but that's not always the most appropriate installation. And it is common in many locations in the U.S. for things like this to be worked through. And yeah, they have to hide the piping, and it can be done in some way. This is the kind of thing where if we had to retroactively do something, no, we're not going to require that they do it in the middle of winter or in the hottest part of the summer. We work with owners on these types of projects to come up with a solution that works for everyone, but also preserves the historic character of the building. And there could be instances where it can't be moved. I think that there are some of the piping locations that are currently there that most definitely should be moved because of the fact that they are in the location of, I mean, this building has minimal details, but it has details, and those types of piping locations are the ones that should be prioritized for moving in particular.
So really, the consultation didn't happen, and this recommended motion, it would allow for some of that to happen. There would have to be some discussion. And I'm curious, too, I know Andrew talked about, and are we at the point where we can discuss this?
I guess,
Okay.
if you have more questions for the owner, then maybe we should finish those before you have a discussion. And then maybe you should have a motion and discuss that. So,
Any more questions for the owner?
Well, general question and remark about, the damage that was done from the window units and the effort to have those there and remove them. It just seems like the obvious solution is the mini split and the piping. Obviously, where does it go? How do we make it work? How do we preserve the aesthetics of the building and all that? But this is just such a balance of pros and cons here. And I guess the only question I really had was, were you and your wife happy with the aesthetics of the white piping?
No, the intention was always to paint them, as I stated. And we had, as I stated, we had a lift on site. It just did not get done, and so it was done early this spring. And we had to do it with ladders. It wasn't very much fun. It was not very much fun. Now, and I agree wholeheartedly. I guess that comes back to in 1927 was historically a window unit. Would that aesthetically please? I mean, I'm just saying theoretical. So is a window unit, should that have to be permitted and to be accepted historically?
No, but that damage would be considered, I think, like gradual or passive, whereas this historic brick was directly, removed.
Sure. Well, I'm asking theoretically, though. There were no window units in 1927.
No.
And so when we're truly hanging window units for 6 months out of the year, we're changing the look of that building aesthetically. And it's not what it was when it was built.
But it's not permanent, I mean,
This is true.
there's no removal of material.
I agree, but it's still there for 6 months out of the year.
Yeah, I mean.
And it's going to be every year because it's hot in
It sounds like there was
summertime.
permanent damage from the water and
Yes,
moisture.
gradual permanent damage, but yes, but I think you know what I mean when I
And I agree. I agree. It's not permanent, but they're always going to be there. And as I pay attention on College Street. There's houses that are incredibly beautiful that don't have central air, and they've got window. A friend of mine calls them window rattlers because they sit there and shake, and they sound like a semi-truck parked in the front yard. So this is a quiet, extremely efficient. I mean, that's, and I'll be honest, there was some bottom line thought too. I mean, and you're probably right, our contractor thought of it from that aspect, but he also thought of it, just from a standpoint of what is pragmatic.
Would you be open to the idea of working with staff to approach these one by one and find the best possible solutions for them one by one?
Potentially, but I mean, it's one of those things, and I guess I also look at it from the standpoint of a sorority house. It's empty for 3 months out of the year and over Christmas break. We have tenants in there full time, and our tenants are our customers, and that's part of. I guess I go back to that. We try to maintain a pretty high level for our tenants. Once again, this is not a bunch of frat guys living there.
No, it's a
having
beautiful
parties.
place, and I think everybody really appreciates, this issue aside.
Sure.
All the efforts.
Sure. Go ahead.
Oh, I am just curious. So you said you've had the property for 10 years. When you bought it, did you know that it was in a historic district? It was a historic.
I knew that, but I didn't know the guidelines and the boundaries. I really did not. It was our first. I own other properties in town, but it was our first in a historic district, and at first, truly, a first older building. So yes, it was. There were there's been a lot of things learning on the run with this particular piece of property. But it's also, I mean, I'll reiterate, we take a lot of pride in it. We do a lot of work there.
Yeah. And I would assume that this is maybe the first time did you know about the review process when you bought the house?
Did not.
This is the first time
Yes.
you kind of encountered
Yep.
the system and.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I take that back. We did put in we replaced a set of stairs in the back where I did work with Jessica on the set of stairs. And once again, but that was also something that was of time that two tenants weren't going to be able to get into their apartments, and we had to make a change. So yes, I did know about it to a certain extent. I guess I didn't know the depth and breadth of it.
I guess we've had situations where this has happened, right? Where something has been done, it doesn't match the guidelines, and the recommended motion is to say, yeah, I guess go back and make those changes to make it go with what we would have approved to begin with, right? I mean, if we're looking at this from the perspective of a project that just exists, we would say no to this.
The directive is, whether the work is done or not, you always review it as if it is a proposal. Because if the work is done, it was done without the proper review.
Right.
And so that fact kind of like doesn't matter
Right.
in your review of it. So you would review it as a proposal.
Right, because that would also entail working with you to figure out what is, so some of those things, if they are like, we can't change that, then, okay, that might be a reason to give the exception, right? But in this instance, we just don't have any of those. We don't have the reasoning for that, I guess, marked down.
In my opinion, I feel like this is a situation where some kind of compromise needs to be reached. There need to be some kind of alterations made to what is currently there. And, that will require working with staff.
And if, as I said, there's a motion
Yep.
that's made. You can also approve keeping them as they are painted. You could make it less than that as for relocating as well, if you wanted to relocate some. It's the commission's purview to determine what you're approving and what that motion is.
I mean,
If we approve this, sorry,
ahead.
if we approve this, then we're saying, just go work with you and see what's possible, right?
Yeah.
So like, if there is a situation where we're saying, one of these things, we can't move these, right? There's no reason, or we have, then that's a thing, but it's been reviewed by us.
If there is one, like, if you approve removing one, and we work through it, and we can't find a way to remove that, we would come back to the commission to tell you. Because then the alternative would be to remove that unit completely.
So for example, for the first bullet point, if you added comma, when feasible, prioritizing piping that interferes with key architectural features, something like that.
Yeah.
Would that do the trick?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, staff has recommended everything on the north face, plus both sides of that front north bump out. If you want to do less than that, then you should state which ones you want
All out
relocated.
individual.
Yes.
Like, we could say the front facing.
And we can look at that.
Can
And
I
then,
can I ask the question from the standpoint of, but without understanding truly how to, I mean, we can make that, and you can make that suggestion, and it can be passed, but then all of a sudden, a whole new set of problems evolve because I'm once again going through other people's apartments to make it to those front.
and yes,
front
that's a
units.
fact.
But you're the owner and the steward of a historic building that's in a historic district. And so that is your job as the owner of the building, to preserve the integrity of the historic
Actually,
building.
my job first and foremost is to preserve the integrity of the building to serve my customers.
But as the steward of a historic building in a historic district, it is,
And I understand that. I think it goes hand in hand. I don't think it's my first job. Now, if I were to neglect that building and let it fall to dust, that would not be a very good steward either.
I think
And-
that communication with historic preservation staff from the beginning of the project probably is the most, would have been ideal. And at this point, it seems like it would be a good idea to open up that discussion and move forward from there. That's what I would say. Because it sounds like the option was completely shut out on your side, and no discussion was had about this project whatsoever. It's the exterior front-facing, part of the building where bricks were removed, and no discussion was had. So I think a discussion needs to be had about what the options are.
So it might be a good time to go ahead and move on, make a motion, have your discussion about that motion.
Okay. Would somebody make a motion on the commission, please?
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Brown recommends a certificate of appropriateness for the project at 811 East College Street as presented in the staff report with the following conditions. Piping on the north wall of the building and each side of the front projecting bay is relocated. All additional piping is painted to blend with the building behind. Any damage to the brick building caused by the project is repaired with matching brick and mortar so that it is not visible.
Second?
Beck seconds.
All right, let's discuss.
I'm wondering about the first bullet, and Andrew pointed this out too, relocated. So that doesn't necessarily mean, that's just looking at the options. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to go through the roof. They might be able to route to the back.
And there might,
That's-
there's,
You don't know what.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the way I think about this is if we were able to mentally back up to the start of the project and say, gosh, this is how we should have approached it, let's come up with a design, submit it to staff, review it. Staff might say, yeah, this works, this doesn't. It might be that every apartment except for this one can have HVAC if we follow all these guidelines. And so then we work and we say, great, well, for this one, let's do this other odd thing that doesn't exactly follow the guidelines and allow for that one exception to the project and so on. And so in my mind, as a homeowner, as a property owner, let's say, if I go ahead with a project without following the proper process and someone says, oh gosh, you should have followed this process, I sort of have to go back and follow the process. And so what I'm understanding from all the different bullets of the motion is that we're saying, oh, let's go back, think through what the process should have been, follow the process. There may be some pipes that can't be moved, but if they can't be moved, it's because had we done the process this way from the beginning, this would be where we would have landed. And so it's not so much that we're making an exception because they're already there. We're making an exception because that's where they would have landed no matter what.
The harm reduction approach.
Jessica, if we look at that picture again, I assume we could we could call out, say, 1 to 3 pipes that we would prioritize as needing to be moved, right?
so we have these, probably this one, and there were 1, 2, 3, and 4 on this face. Those were the ones that were indicated.
And my only thought on that, as far as the ones that we may or may not prioritize, is maybe one of those that we might prioritize is the one that, again, had we done this from the beginning, maybe that's the one that couldn't be anywhere except for the exact spot that it's in. And maybe the ones that we don't prioritize, they have an easier than other, right, solution.
Yeah.
And so why not do those solutions? So I
Low-hanging
feel like the
fruit.
idea of working with staff to see about all of the pipes that are on the faces that we've called out, I think makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the only,
Is that what's covered in this motion, or do we need to amend the motion?
Yes,
Or
because
is
the
that
motion
up to
covers the
staff?
north face and the 2 sides, right?
Yeah.
That is covered in what we're saying right now. With that what you're describing is what's covered in this motion.
and then as staff, Jessica, you would then just kind of choose based on the motion, select the ones that seem the most viable first, maybe, and go from there? Like, in terms of like what solutions are available?
So if you approve this motion, then we would have to work with their HVAC person to determine alternative routes
For all on the
for all of
facing-
those that you are included in the motion. And then that's where it would come back where, if there's one that's squirrely.
If I were going to be generous about, removing any from, it would be the back side of the bay, but is the entire bay included?
The motion includes these 2 pipes, and I would say this pipe.
Okay, and that pipe, okay, so that's what I would, that's what, okay.
I guess I just want to challenge the commission to really ask themselves, does this ruin the spirit of the historic architecture of the building? And I just want us to make sure that this is such an egregious act against the historic character of the building that we can't allow something like this. And
Egregious seems like a strong word. I think we just go back to our guidelines, and our guidelines would say these wouldn't be there. So we're going back to, if this had come through to us, what would our guidelines say?
Yeah, that's just the funny thing is it didn't come to us. And
know.
I am more curious why we have contractors working in Iowa City that claim that they didn't know that this is a permit thing. So there's all kinds of,
And that's-
hindsights and all this, but
Isn't this the third meeting in a row where we've heard tales of contractors who have
Well, and
no
that's
idea
definitely
they have
something
to-
that I'll be letting the building inspectors know, is that they have HVAC contractors
I
who
mean,
think
these
they
are
don't need permits. But
Permits costing thousands of dollars with the city. And so-
right, and they're required. Any time HVAC is done, a permit is required.
And this
On a
is a
commercial
dumb question.
building, on a
construction
multifamily building?
permit? Is that what type
No,
of-
it's a mechanical permit.
Mechanical, okay.
And my only concern with the idea of, is this egregious enough that we would object to it, is that essentially then all it takes is for a contractor to claim that they don't know, right, and do
That's the
something, and then
precedent.
it's up to us to always decide which of these things that didn't follow the process or follow the guidelines do we actually want to pick to go back on. That's the part that I don't like about it. And
Yeah,
so
it's a chicken and egg thing, but I just
Yeah.
really want to try to encourage property owners, homeowners to work with our commission and just get the word out there on the streets that we're
Yeah.
not this fearsome group that's going to be saying no to everything. And yes, we have guidelines, but I don't think those guidelines are set in stone, that we can't revisit them and we can't change with the times.
I think we've given a number of exceptions to things.
For
but
instance,
it's
the egress
because-
window,
right. But it's because that process has gone through, we know why that is going against the guidelines, right? There's been a reported, that's not the word I want, but like a recorded situation of, we can't do it this way because of this, therefore we're doing it this way. Great. We tend to be relatively lenient on that, I think. We just don't know what any of the reasons for not doing those things are.
We did have multiple complaints about this installation as well from the general public.
It seems like we just
They
need
were
more
white or
information
red?
of if we're going to allow for an exception or not. Like, we just don't know what are the options for these.
Which is
Right?
what we're
Yeah.
doing here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Jessica, you said if you went through the conversation and tried to find a compromise, but there was no other way to move these pipes, the suggestion would be then you have to get rid of them completely and go back to like.
I don't know. We would have to see. I mean,
So it sounds like if we approve this motion, the negotiation begins.
Yes.
Yes.
What we do first is approve it, and then it gets talked through in terms of
Yes.
feasibility.
yeah, I don't know the plans of this building. I haven't been inside it. For me to make suggestions, all of those things have to happen, or
Right.
some of those. I mean, I need to know what the plan is. I need to know, I need information about the building.
I mean, it
in
would be
general.
nice if there weren't a pipe coming straight out of one of the more prominent window arches, I mean.
I just feel like at this point, Jessica and staff, they need to go in, take a look.
Yeah.
Figure out what's possible and go from there.
Well, and I would think that it's actually the HVAC contractor who needs to have some communication. I'm not an HVAC person. I might have learned about it in school because everybody who goes to architecture school has to learn something about it, but that doesn't mean that I would prescribe the locations for these things.
Right.
It would be more like we'd have a conversation. Okay, how long can the piping be? How many bends can it have in it? There are things like that are also considerations.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like we're opposed to this kind of system. It's just more of like,
No.
we're happy the other system is gone. We like the upkeep that's been happening. It's just this wouldn't have.
No, we have approved several of these systems, and yeah. In fact, there's a home on later on in the staff report portion that we approved one just this last month.
Okay. Do we have any more commission discussion? So we'll want to make a motion or an amended motion?
You have a motion,
Yeah.
so you
If there are any,
either decide to go with it, or you decide if you want to amend it, and if you want to amend it, then you do that.
And as the motion stands, it basically means that let the negotiations begin. Jessica goes inside and speaks with the HVAC on what the possibilities are for repairing what's been done.
Sure.
All right. Then I think we are ready to vote. It doesn't sound like there will be any amendments, so all in favor of the motion. Can we have, I wouldn't mind having it up on the screen, really, if you could.
Okay.
I haven't said aye yet. Okay, so let's do it again. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
All right. Item 3, 610 North Johnson Street.
610 North Johnson Street was on the November meeting and was voted to be deferred.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
We'll be in
Yep.
touch. It is in the Goosetown Horace Mann Conservation District, located here. I do want to let you know that I revised the staff report slightly. I had a little bit more time to explore the history of this building. So this building used to be where Mercy Hospital built the pedestrian drop-off on Market Street, like right under or right west of the skywalk that
So it was
they have
moved?
there. And so it was moved by Max Yoakum in 1967 to this location. Before it was moved, it had a full-width front porch and actually a little open porch on the back. Obviously, when it was moved, the porch was truncated, and the little porch on the back was not reinstalled. So it does have some differences to what we normally see in porch construction. This was another project that was done without a permit. What ended up happening is that it was, they applied for a permit on the same day that they started demo, and it was reported to me by the member of the public, again, that it was done, that it was being done. And so I reached out to the building inspector, and eventually we got through the, they've received a citation, and they're currently going to court. And so I believe there's a court date next week. Within 1 week, the work was done, and so we were never given any opportunity to review the work. The owner has stated that it was an emergency, and it was a life safety issue. The building inspectors and the building department are the ones who determine if a property is a life safety issue, and they are the ones who will instruct an owner how to make a property safe for occupants. That is already something that has been set up within the city. It does not fall on the owner to determine that it's a life safety issue and that they therefore need to do work without a permit. The building inspectors would have made that determination and help the property owner make the situation safe, provide access, generally. So life safety is not something, especially with this project, that would preclude the idea of going through historic review. Because we were involved in the awards and the work was done, this wasn't a priority. So we communicated with them several weeks later, provided them with some options, and it was at that point when we knew then we would be coming to the commission for the project. So I'll go through it a little bit. We have had 2 members of the public reach out and email that I will read to you as well, since the agenda has been published this time. Okay, so the project was the reconstruction of the entire porch floor area. Here we see some of the deterioration. This porch is different from a lot because of the fact that we have a part of the basement that extends out under the porch. So it doesn't have like typical piers. You can see that there was some rotting in the corner, a little bit across the front, but a lot of it was in this outer corner here. Here's a detail of it as well.
Was the safety issue that you could fall into the basement?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't get into that. It's totally the building inspector's purview.
Sure.
So not mine, and not necessarily the owners. And so what they did is they replaced several elements of the porch floor structure, put plywood over it, and installed this treated floor. Here are some details of it as well. So this does not meet the guidelines for several reasons. And I'll go through those, and we'll have to come back and look at these images as well. They also rebuilt the stairs. There are some requirements that we have for stairs that they have agreed that they would go back and fix the stairs. And then, of course, they replaced these 2 porch posts as well.
And you have a photo of, do you have a photo of the replacement?
Original.
No, what they've replaced those with.
Right now, they just replaced them with 4x4s. This is the current
That's currently there.
installation.
I see, okay.
What they have done. Okay, so the guidelines. Basically, porches are very complex. When we reconstruct a porch, we follow the guidelines. Elements of a porch align in a certain way, and we have specific flooring, and we prescribe the installation of that flooring as well, all in an effort to prevent the kind of damage that we have seen here. Several things are the fact that we require vertical grained Douglas fir. We can, by exception, approve an alternative material. We can approve a different tongue and groove. We can, but generally, the guidelines start with vertical grain Douglas fir. It's really super hard, very insect and weather resistant, and historically used and still available. It's tongue and groove so that it's even harder and fits together well. We install it so that the grooves are perpendicular to the wall of the house. So if this is the wall of the house, the porch floor slopes slightly down, the grooves lead out away from the house so that the water goes out. You will get water in those grooves, no matter how well you paint it. And so the grooves have to lead perpendicular. Any of you who have a historic porch floor, it's going to be installed that way. And if your porch turns the corner, it's mitered so that it still does that. We require that when we have someone who has a house with historic integrity like this, because it's the historic way and it helps them last longer. That's how you have some of these original porch floors that are over 100 years old, because of the way they were installed and then cared for properly. Similarly, the porch has a floor structure, a rim joist. It has a piece of trim material that's put over that, and we always want the floor to overhang that so that the water drips on off instead of staying in the porch structure. So if we go back to this image, we can see here that, first of all, the tongue and groove, it's parallel to the house. They probably made this also a flat surface, so any water's just going to stay there. In addition, they did make the floor so it overhung the rim joist around, but then they put the trim piece over that and made it flush with the top of the floor, and they filled that gap with caulk. caulk deteriorates. It does not last long. So that's another place where they're going to get water into that structure. And so that's why we don't approve floors in this way. We would want it to be perpendicular to the house and everything. And it would also then look right in that way. Let's see. So we have basically, this first guideline about porches has to do with, columns and brackets and details. If we have historic ones and we need to replace them, we replace them to match. If there are some that are missing and not there, then we replace them or install them to match the others. Here's about the flooring. Most porches have porch piers. This one does not. And there is a way that we can deal with that, and we'll look at that later. The other thing is that the senior building inspector told me he has some concerns about the structure of this porch floor because they're basically cantilevering onto a board that they didn't make into a beam, and so your entire roof load is going down onto these outer columns that are not potentially supported as needed. So some of the staff recommendation is that if additional structure is required, that piers are installed under the outer corners of the porch. And that could be poured concrete block. We have a brand new foundation because it was moved in '67, so it's not like we would require stone or brick or rock face block or an unusual material or something like that. So that might come up in the future with this project. And then skirting is required, and we'll look at that a little bit too. And as well, using unpainted treated wood for elements that would have been painted in their historic applications is disallowed in our guidelines. We have another section on wood, and it recommends duplicating and replacing historic wood elements when they cannot be repaired. They should be new or salvaged that match the historic ones. We only substitute a material in place of wood if it retains the functionality. Basically, we don't approve vinyl elements. So it's disallowed to substitute something that does not have the paintability and function of the wood. So they had originally in the first time that we went through we had a staff report in November, they had suggested a vinyl column, and so that had been included, and we let them know that we couldn't approve a vinyl column, and so they did suggest these columns. Based on staff review, none of these columns match this column. So there are a couple options. First of all, we know that this house was moved. This is a 4-square. This 4-square would never have had turned Queen Anne columns. Somebody installed them. They're there. They've been there since the 60s. We could approve those 2 columns on each side of the entryway to match the columns that are there because our guidelines allow that, because they're there. Staff would recommend, though, that if we could not match those columns, and that the proposal was to replace all of the columns, that we would replace them with a column that was appropriate for a 4-square instead. And so they could match this column because there are people in the community who could take this column and copy it. That is a possibility. So the commission could go along with approving, replacing those 2 4x4 posts with columns that match these. In addition, 4 squares could have, without tall piers. Sometimes we see tall piers and short columns. On a regular full-size column, there could be a simple square column. It would be a true 8 inches on each side. It would not be 7.5, it would be 8 inches. It would have mitered corners, so usually it would be a post wrapped in cedar with a base and capital as well. Or it could have something like a classical column. A lot of four squares that have more classical details do have these round classical columns. This isn't a four square, but it was just the quickest one I could find a picture of that had classical columns. And these types of columns are available in an 8-inch size in fiberglass. They're also available, you can get them salvaged or something like that. So if the owner did not want to try to match those columns to the outer corner ones, staff would propose something like either the box column or the round column, which frankly could give them the opportunity to potentially not need the central columns. It will all depend on what the structure of the frieze board, the box beam is that they have around the porch, and that could potentially be bolstered or increased its structural carrying capabilities on the inside. We wouldn't want to make it expand outwards any more than it does. So when it comes to the porch piers, this house has a complete concrete basement, and it actually fills the space under this porch. It's not set back like the one we're talking about, it fills it. And so they've used wood to create fake piers and then installed skirting in between. One of the difficulties with the property that we're talking about is the fact that they have windows in some of their basement wall. So staff would recommend that skirting is still installed, but frankly, just openings, framed openings are made in the skirting to allow the light to penetrate to the window. And however that would need to work out.
How are the columns resting on, where's the bottom of the column currently?
Yeah, they're just resting on this, and that's why the building inspector has questioned the structure of this, and so they'll need to work through that with them. The staff recommendation is just that in this case, with this type of property, if some kind of structure is required below that floor structure, that it's not just wood posts, that we actually have some concrete block piers that are placed under there, so it would look more traditional. Let's see. So this is the before picture. These were 2x4s, and now they're 4x4s. Originally, when this was reported, we thought the railing was being replaced as well. This railing doesn't follow our guidelines, so it would have needed to be altered, but they did just set it aside and reinstall it. And so we're not making any recommendations to change the railing at all because it wasn't part of the scope of the project. So we do have a recommended motion, and currently the motion reads that the porch floor is replaced as described in the staff report. That means it would be vertical grain Douglas fir. It would be installed perpendicular to the front wall of the house. It would overhang the skirt board as well. It would not be the existing floor. They'd have to replace that actual material. The porch columns are replaced in the staff report, as described in the staff report as well, which means that, again, they would either match the outer columns with the inner two or replace all of them with something more appropriate for a four square, and that frame porch skirting is installed between false piers or true piers with openings for the windows in the foundation. Okay, so we had an email from Daniel Kinney, and he states, Dear Historic Preservation Commission, I'm a neighbor of 610 North Johnson Street in the Brown Street Historic District. I'm sorry. Recently, I witnessed the porch get rebuilt with 2x4s and 4x4s without conforming to the guidelines for historic preservation that I followed on my porch. I do not believe the owner of this property submitted a plan to the Historic Commission for approval before being granted a building permit, and if not, why not? why should anyone else living in a historic district bother to follow the steps of review and approval? I did clarify him that they have not received a building permit either, so that they didn't get one. I'm writing to insist that the historic preservation guidelines be followed and enforced for this property, in part to maintain the integrity of the commission and its guidelines. I fear that if we enforce the guidelines for private residents living in their properties but not wealthy property owners of rental properties within the district, the city is perpetuating an unjust two-tiered system. Dana Harris wrote, Historic Preservation Commission and City of Iowa City. As you know, the front porch at 610 North Johnson was rebuilt without a permit or review by Historic Preservation. Even if I were not a homeowner in a historic district, I would be dismayed that the city allowed the porch rebuild without either a permit or review by Historic Preservation. Again, they did not. I hope that this deceitful tactic is addressed and that corrections are made to the new porch to conform with the Historic Preservation guidelines.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
Wagner moves to approve a certificate of appropriateness for the project 610 North Johnson Street as presented in the staff report with the following conditions. The porch floor is replaced as described in the staff report. 2, the porch columns are replaced as described in the staff report. And 3, framed porch skirting is installed between false piers or true piers with openings for the windows in the foundation.
Stork seconds.
Oh. And
Did we need to ask for?
yeah, we do have a representative from the owner here to speak as well.
Take it back.
I have handouts. Am I allowed to use them?
Yep. Sure.
Okay, great. Because they're kind of in 3 parts. Grab one and pass it down. It should work out fine that way. I'll sign in.
Provided.
There should be 10, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
By the way, I'm Laura Hansen, and I work for Prestige Properties owned by Mike Oliveira, and Mike Oliveira is the owner of the property here as well. So yeah, I would, deceitful, boy, that was a strong word. I would like to first address, as you guys get these pieces here, the timeline. I have put together actually a timeline of when we did see that there was an issue that was a little more severe than just a bouncy porch, and then how that went. We'd originally on that porch, we had got a certificate of approval for the black pipe rail. So you guys had seen this porch before. There's the black pipe rail. You can see it in that picture there. So in the original complaint that came to us, it said that wasn't approved, but it was. So after visiting, we did notice that the damage was more severe than just the corner that we thought. You know, we knew the porch was a little bouncy, but we didn't realize until we started opening a corner how bad it was. And you can see from the second picture here, it's this one with the open. That porch isn't just open to a portion of the basement. That porch underneath that is the basement. You know, so it's just kind of like this, you know, and the porch is here, but, you know, under here's basement. So when we realized that those trusses were as bad as they were, I think it's back, one more. There it is, down in that corner. You can really see that how the water damage had come through and really affected that whole structure. And so when we did do the demolition and got into that, it did become a life safety issue. There are tenants that live there. It was an occupied home, and you know that was a life safety issue to them specifically. So we didn't want them coming out onto that, and they are college students, and also it suddenly made the house open. You know, that was open into the living area, so to speak. It's a basement of the house. You know, so we needed to get it closed up as quickly as possible for that reason. And you can see in the next picture, that's the one with James on the finishing up here. What our builder did was a sister system in order to quickly add structural stability to that porch. And with those trusses going already perpendicular. That's why we went ahead and went horizontal again with the flooring. Now, it is tongue and groove, and it is treated pine, which I understand is also very durable, and weather resistant. I understand that it's not, the recommended ones there, but I understand that the life expectancy of it, obviously I'm not a contractor, is very similar. It doesn't deteriorate as quickly as, regular pine or anything like that. It's still a really nice material. And painted, it's really difficult to tell the difference. What else was I going to say? The flooring doesn't retain the appearance and paintability. Okay. Perpendicular. Yeah, that says 2 and 3. And, one of the things that I think is really super important is that we did contact as an emergent situation, that this was an emergency, that we really need you guys now to address this. We were really adamant about that when we contacted for the building permit and the historic preservation certificate of approval. And even then, on the timeline, you can see that I even reached out again and said, this is an emergency when I'm going to hear from you guys. And the email that I received back literally said, we do this in a first come, first served basis, which was really hurtful, because this was an important situation to us. And yes, we were continuing with work, but as a life safety issue, we really felt that we had to. One of the things that I can address is the fact, you can see a little bit of the work that was being done in this upper corner. I'm going to walk over here, guys. This upper corner here, where those posts would sit, our builder did do a lot of structural, and I've talked to him since I've talked to you, Jessica, a lot of structural reinforcement on those corners to bear the load of the columns for the roof of that porch. So that, once I work with Tim again, that shouldn't be an issue. He said it'll hold an elephant. The 2x4s that were there originally, and the posts that were there originally, actually, the posts that were originally on those corners sat between the joists and were sinking. And that's why the 2x4s that were by where the stairs come up, Dan said he took them off there, they looked like a banana because they had been bearing so much load. So yeah, the porch definitely had some issues. We request an exemption on the direction of the porch simply because we did try to reach out. We did this because that is all living space under there, and we really needed to get it closed up. Even a rain shower could have caused, an issue. It wouldn't have necessarily been horrible, but, it's still an issue where the house was open without any way to close it back up. And because of the nature of the way those joists were rotted, we just really didn't feel that without going ahead and creating the structural stability there that we could do anything different. We couldn't wait and take them out and make them horizontal in order to make the floor perpendicular. So we do ask for an exemption to have the porch the direction it is. We don't feel that it egregiously affects, I'm using that word, I even wrote it down before y'all started saying it, affects the aesthetic of the historical nature of the home, especially since this is a house that was moved. The porch isn't an original historic porch. This house is just kind of a little anomaly when it comes to that. So then moving on to the skirting. The guidelines that talk about skirting say that it's to fill the space below the porch floor and the grade, but there's no ground below that since it is all open. There's no ground below it. It is part of the basement below it. And if you can switch to the one, I think it shows the front. Yeah, right there. You can see that there isn't more than 6 inches really to go back to put a pier. So any pier that would be there, would be false. And honestly, one of the things that I noticed, if you can flip forward to where your box columns are, that picture, there's some skirting. And I noticed the box columns, but I also noticed the skirting. And I think it looks less aesthetically pleasing as having the entire foundation, being monotone there, especially since it's so narrow between, I don't know what you call that, a little overhang piece of the porch over where the pier would go, that part. I think it looks, we would also have to disrupt a lot of the landscaping that's there. Some of it's established, some of it's newer. But I think aesthetically, that looks worse than just having that one, the monochrome colored block. So we do ask for an exception as well for the skirting, as, the installation around the window. I mean, that could be worked with. The piers, probably, we would really have to do some, I mean, there's just really not a lot of room. The builder said, because I was speaking with our builder, and he says there's just really not a lot of room to do it, especially if they're requesting a pier. So on that basis, that's why we're requesting an exception for that. The posts, the 2x4s, like I said, they were so bowed. And I did explain that we have done extensive underneath there. We did extensive work on how it can bear the load so that it's going to be nice and strong. We did consider just removing the 4x4s and going with just the two outside. One of the things that our builder said that we've had an issue with, though, is how to connect the rail. And especially being a rental, they tend to turn out like this in a few years, and they get very wobbly. So he likes them there simply to have something to put the rail to, so that it creates more stability for the rail. That way they don't lean against it and things like that. So that's one of the reasons. But with the columns, that being said, with the columns, one of the things that we're agreeable to is replacing either a matching one or all four. And if we did all four, we'd probably, I think you'd mentioned before that as long as they were the similar types of that'd be okay. But if they have to be the other ones, the other round ones, that we would probably be amenable to going ahead and replacing all four. So that it matched more of the Foursquare. I'm not a really huge fan of the railing at all, period, but, I know it's not very attractive. And in the future, that may be something that we address, because I don't think Mike likes it either. Because if you look at some of the other things that he's worked on in the past, I mean, we've worked with you guys before. Over the past few years, we've had 10 projects. 8 of them have been easily approved. We've applied, we've heard back, we've gotten the work done with a certificate of approval. One of them we scrapped. We decided not to do the project, and then there's this one. So it's not that we don't know the system, and it's not that we don't agree with the system. It's that this was an issue of expediency. And that's what we went with on this. So, that being said, the house is, a kind of an anomaly since it was moved. I don't know what the other district was, where it was moved from, or if that was a district at all at that time. But it is in one now. And like I said, we did apply, and we did try and reach out. And we did try to make it that, hey, this is urgent to us. We really have to go ahead with something. So that's where we stood with that. If you look at the last pictures, and we are going to put the toe kicks back in and paint the stairs. I don't know if we've painted those yet. But the other thing is, if any other work was noticed during this time, I mean, we were there on the property doing gutters, cleaning gutters for the winter. We also check eaves for bats, because in these old homes, boy, the thing this big, boy, and the bats can get in. So we always try and go around all our properties and do that kind of maintenance in order to make sure that they are well taken care of and protected. So pretty much that's what I have to ask for from the commission and the explanations of what we did. So, we just want it to be fair and understood that honestly, this was, with it being that open and with the instability of the trusses the way they were, we just really didn't feel we had an option other than to go forward and make the necessary repairs. So I'd be happy to take your questions and answer anything I'm capable of answering.
How long has Mike owned the building?
He's owned that since 2010. That one picture that is in the packet does show.
July.
Yeah, yes.
So in 10 years inspecting it, then suddenly it becomes a problem?
No, we did
Had to
know that
get-
there was an issue with the porch, and it was on our long-term project list, but we just didn't understand until we went to check this complaint out, how bad it had gotten.
Okay.
So-
And did you hand this thing out?
Yes, actually I did, because it just shows that, we are also trying to help keep, affordable housing as well as beautiful housing. We want to provide the alternative of obviously the cookie cutter, high-rise, tissue paper walls type of experience.
And this is per person. We need to, the average monthly rent per person.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not as a
actually
whole
was presented at the council meeting last night from the undergraduate student group, and they had that slide in there that shows where Prestige falls in accordance with some of the other landlords in town and how our rent is more affordable than a lot of them, and we don't want that to change.
Can I ask what this has to do with the porch?
In the fact that when we have extended expenses going, for any of the repairs that we do, like especially like if we have to tear this all back out and redo it and say we have to do other things, we don't want to have to pass any additional expenses on. We are really trying to be good stewards of just as well as the property of also, and it was like the other gentleman said, those are our customers, and we want to provide affordable housing. We're trying to keep the goal of affordable housing and beautiful housing together, So it is something that we do consciously work on.
I imagine, so you saw this problem, we're not the ones, or at least that you would come to for an emergency situation, right?
No,
So
we
something saying like, this is actually an emergency situation because of this would be a different group of people.
Yeah, it's the building inspectors 100% have that purview. If they tell me that a project is an emergency project, then I will review it in an emergency. If they do not tell me, I review it like all other projects. This project was done, they started demo the same day they submitted the application. They should have not started demo. They should have just submitted the application, gone through the review process. If it was an emergency situation, the building inspectors would have prescribed a way to handle that. And then we would have reviewed it and approved it. And if it had followed the guidelines, then we could have even approved it as a staff review. If it wasn't going to follow the guidelines, I would have come to the commission. But it is not, I don't determine that something is an emergency, the building inspectors do. For instance, when the brick wall was collapsing on 304 South Summit, the building inspector said, this is an emergency, and we reviewed it right away and went ahead. Those owners did not start a thing, even though they had to vacate the premises until they got their permits.
And I did use that word in both my applications, emergency, because I made application for the building permit the same day that I made application for historical approval.
So our handbook is available online, and I assume that the property owner is aware of the guidelines and had access to the handbook. As somebody who owns, 10 properties or more.
102.
102. So that information was available. So if work were going to commence on a historic home in a historic district, the property owner would have been aware of his access to those public guidelines.
And he's pretty familiar with them in most cases.
So
No,
why
really.
weren't they followed?
Just simply because of the emergent situation, the life safety issue of not knowing the structural integrity of those joists and not having the time to change that whole structure. That would take, to remove the whole joist and change it from, that one is perpendicular. You'd have to change the joist to horizontal in order to have then perpendicular flooring.
I would say that then, like in a situation where, let's say, a hurricane takes a roof off, you would respond to that emergency situation by putting a blue tarp on the roof, and that would be considered temporary. And in this case, because it's a historic property in a historic district, this solution would be considered temporary and would need to be replaced according to our guidelines. I think that's the answer that we would probably have for you.
Sure.
That's what the commission is here to uphold. So it was a solution that the property owner felt needed to happen, but, there are reasons that there are guidelines, and that is ultimately to, protect the integrity of the house and long-term safety issues. So
Was there a tenant living in the basement right under the porch area?
No, not in that area.
Okay.
But it did leave the entire basement open, with having that open. And we'd actually had to do some work on that house before where we'd done a lot of moisture mitigation throughout that basement. And as far as, I think we even installed anchors. A contractor, Tomlinson Cannon, installed anchors into one of the walls that's under the porch.
The space underneath there, that's apparently a conditioned space. So over your floor joist, it looks like you have plywood OSB with underneath that plastic. I mean, he wouldn't be sitting on just floor, there's,
No, yeah.
Yeah, there's
at
plywood
that
there, I
point,
know
yeah.
that.
Yeah,
and then it's probably insulated underneath there?
yeah.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, once the plastic was on, it's effectively closed in. They did not need to continue on by installing the floor.
Well, you could actually install the correct flooring in the correct orientation over that.
Because of the fact that
you have a subfloor.
you have the plywood on there, it doesn't matter which direction your floor goes.
I was wondering about that.
When you don't have plywood, then yes, your floor joists have to run the opposite direction. But in this case, since we have a roof that they've created, the flooring is just like cladding.
Yeah.
So it does not need to go in the opposite direction of the floor joists.
So the joists would not need to be replaced?
No.
Nope.
So really, the flooring would need to be removed according to suit the guidelines, and then the flooring would be replaced.
Yeah, the flooring would be replaced. The recommended motion would also have them install false piers.
Right.
So if structural piers are not required, then false piers, similar to what's going on here, where it's basically wood trim.
For aesthetic purposes, not structural.
100% aesthetic purposes, because it's required all traditional porches. Our guidelines require skirting if your gap between the bottom of that joist and the ground is 18 inches or more.
Gotcha. And then remind me, what is this, how structurally will the columns be supported again, according to the recommendation?
We're not getting into that.
Okay, we're not getting into that.
There was just, the building inspector had suggested that there was potentially a problem
I see.
with the structure.
I see.
And so he and I have had a conversation. They will have to work that out through the permitting process about whether or not whatever they've done as a fix works for the building inspector. They're the ones who will determine that. If structural piers were required, then we would definitely have a recommendation for that,
Sure.
because our guidelines would be pretty clear. Porches are traditional in a way. But if they're not required, false piers are fine.
So it's not a terrible, it's not an enormous undertaking to suit the guidelines.
Or you don't have to rip the porch off and then redo the.
Right.
No, they'll just have to replace the floor. They'll probably have to patch the nail holes that they put through the plastic and stuff, but,
Okay.
or replace the plastic.
So we've had a motion. Frank
You-
made a motion.
Do you have more questions for Laura?
Does anybody have more questions?
No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we want to reread the motion?
You have
formalities?
a motion, but if you want to read it again, you can.
I mean, I don't think we have
Wagner
to, but-
moves to approve a certificate of appropriateness for the project at 610 North Johnson Street as presented in the staff report with the following conditions. 1, the porch floor is replaced and as described in the staff report. 2, the porch columns are replaced as described in the staff report. And 3, framed porch skirting is installed between false piers or true piers with openings for the windows and the foundation.
Bowman seconds.
Okay, is there any commission discussion?
Staff would actually like to make a comment on this, just because there was some discussion about the columns. If all 4 columns are replaced, staff would only recommend 2 columns are installed.
Oh, okay. Not the center, not the central.
No, a porch of this length would not have had that. You could have short ones or posts for the end of the railing. Yes, there could be some need to reinforce the beam that is supported by the columns. We don't know that. I don't know
That's
the
not a
dimensions.
factor.
That's something that somebody could calculate and determine if that was necessary or not. But we would not put 4 8-inch box columns across there.
Okay.
Or even 3, just because it would hit right in the middle of the door. So it would be 2. Same with the classical column. It would only be 4 columns if it was a turn spindle column that matched the current installed ones.
Okay.
And that's the way we would review any porch that was similar to this. Non-historic elements that don't work with the architecture themselves, they can remain as long as they remain. When they replace, they should match the architecture of the building.
And the stairs are already, that's already been
Yeah,
agreed to.
the issue with the stairs is that we require a closed riser, so that, we require a closed riser. By code, it's required in certain instances. We require it on all porch stairs. And then we also require a toe kick, that overhang on the stairs.
Okay.
And they have agreed to make those changes, as well as painting the exterior wood.
All right, let's vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. Okay, it's 7:17.
We can go quickly.
Yeah, we can move through the,
I will say that on this next part, I made an error, and 614 Clark does not belong in the certificates of no material effect. It belongs down under intermediate review, so I've moved that in this portion
Okay.
of the thing.
all right, so number 2, 230 Fairchild Street.
Right. This house, interestingly, this house is a key property in the North Side District, and it's because it had all of this special shingled siding, fun brackets, and then right before that owner sold it, they put vinyl siding on the whole thing. And we didn't know it until I had to investigate it for this project, and so we do know that under all of that is some really great trim and siding. Anyway, the scope of this current project was the fact that there was a fire limited here. Originally, they actually wanted to replace the entire roof. They wanted to raise the roof. They wanted to build a different structure, all sorts of things. And so now we went through, we saw photos of the damage and everything, and it's a limited replacement of basically just this kind of area here. We have not talked about the windows. So they're working with insurance. It's another rental property.
Hopefully, they didn't whack off a lot of the trim when they put on the
Yeah,
vinyl siding.
I'm expecting the brackets on that bay are probably mangled, but who knows?
They've gutted that home, too.
Yeah,
I looked in the windows, it's on my block, and they've gutted it.
yeah, it's unfortunate. This little house changed hands, and they're replacing the concrete stairs, and we're making a point to actually not use brilliantly white modern concrete, but concrete that matches, especially up here at the house. This little house came to you earlier in the year because they wanted to remove the bad wood step and stoop and make a brick one. It has an outbuilding that was historically a dairy. And they're going to start a rehab project, and the first step was foundation repair. Frankly, I wasn't sure if any of it was exposed, requiring our review, but they willingly submitted an application and was easily approved, and so we just went with it. We would approve a foundation repair if it has an exposed element that we can see. Work below grade, we don't care about. This house also changed hands. This is a Moffett that originally was just this portion with a garage. It was filled in and the second floor was added. I do believe the owner might want to make it a garage again at some point in time, so that might come to you. We have to work through some zoning issues with that. But currently, I mean, it's in a really, really sad state. And so it's going to be repaired, and hopefully we'll even use our historic preservation funds to help this owner with this project. I mean, there's gaping holes. All the windows have been replaced already, so we're looking at keeping, historic trim and historic siding. It's harder to find a contractor, like this siding right here doesn't need to be replaced. Obviously, some of this does, and we don't want just a wholesale replacement. We want to keep what we can. Oh, and there are two windows on the back that are in the basement and in the dirt like this, and so technically that's a minor review, but we just reviewed it as a certificate of no material effect, and she's going to replace those two windows with fiberglass windows because of their location. And so intermediate review, a garage when there is no garage to demolish should be a minor review, but this project took like a year to review. It was forever, and we had to do it as an intermediate review for a couple different reasons.
It looks like some dystopian night kind of.
The guy who drew it's
Winter.
dystopian.
Yeah, he's an architect, so he was using his rendering software. It's a winter snowy scene, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is a former church, and Mark Russo owns it, and he actually won an award and was published in a magazine for the interior flip that he did on it, and it's stunning. I would own this. I love it. And it's not historic inside. It's other.
It's modern.
It's
Nice.
late 80s modern or early 90s modern or something. It's very interesting.
Cool.
Anyway, there's some mobility issues. There's no garage. This is the site plan, so this is the house. So this part right here of the house is right here. There's a little driveway that leads to nothing. And then there's a little curb cut actually right in this location. They're going to move that over here and put the garage here. They had to move over in order to get the spaces, distances required by zoning. The reason this was an intermediate review are two reasons. A garage approved by staff, we're talking about lap siding, board and batten siding. They're going to use stucco. The owner is a designer and he wanted stucco because he has a brick house. And we can approve that. We looked at the process that they're going to use, and we can approve it. It's not like EIFS or Drive It or any of the really cheap alternatives that they use in suburban shopping malls. It's stucco. The other aspect that really didn't follow the guidelines specifically, I was kind of hesitant about this whole pavement area. Our guidelines require an 8 to 10 foot wide driveway, and that's the maximum that you can get. Because of mobility issues, they wanted more paving, totally understandable. At the same time, the fact that it was coming all the way out to the sidewalk, there was a historic curb cut that used to be there, they were going to remove. Staff was concerned that it would just basically become another driveway. And so what they have done is remove the portion of the paving between the sidewalk and the street. And they are creating like a little planter in between the driveway and the paving. And so then it became an intermediate review with Jordan and I. Just some more images of it. Just a nice little one-car garage. Nothing excessive. So then the other one is the mini split that we approved. And so,
Wait, where is it?
yeah, well, it's kind of a trick question. So normally when we look at these, the first thing we say is, okay, put it with the air conditioning unit. In this case, the air conditioning unit is haphazardly located next to this pretty little bay. So we're like, okay, put it on this side of the house. The contractor, however, said that the fact that the property slopes like this meant that he couldn't get his lift in there. And for a variety of other reasons, what we're doing is we're putting it on this side and requiring that they screen it, which also gets the air conditioning unit screened. And so it'll be on the other side of the house. It'll be painted to match, and then this screening will basically look like what they have going on for the porch skirting. We don't want to match what they have for the railing because that's like architecturally significant. And so it'll just be a simple posts, framed skirting basically between to screen the air conditioning unit that is currently there and then the mini split unit that they will put there. And then all the piping, it'll be smaller
So that
piping.
line set, but they're putting the mini split, what, so they can get up to the third floor? Is that what?
Yeah, it's for the attic.
Okay. So that's-
Specifically. And I looked at the back of the house, and the back of the house doesn't actually have there would not be a way to get the piping around and stuff. So the side of the house is where it was most appropriate.
It's nice to be asked.
Oh, yeah.
It really worked out well, and, yeah, our only concern with this was the fact that when you're driving down the hill, we're like, well, you can kind of see that side. And so screening it was a good compromise here in this one.
Item F, consideration of minutes. I personally had no qualms.
Nope.
Everybody good?
Make a motion?
Villanueva, motion to approve minutes for November 9th, 2023.
Beck, seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Commission information?
The only thing I'll share is that Jordan and I had a really nice, pleasant meeting with the owner of 302 East Bloomington last week.
Polly Eyes.
The building that Polly Eyes is in. I mean, he is a pleasant person who has been caring for that building exactly how a preservationist would care for it forever, his family or the original builders of the building. He lost a large portion of his leg and can no longer get on his knees and do the work himself, and so he's decided to sell it. His reason for not wanting to have it be a landmark is because he wants to get as much money as possible.
Shoot.
And he is working with a realtor who does development something, I don't know. And so he helped him price it. Jordan had asked my colleagues in the planning department for what the development potential of that property is. And it is very limited. Parking is going to be their biggest problem, but it is very limited. They couldn't build the type of building that the Webster is in. They couldn't do that. So we provided that information to them. Until the time when we move forward, we won't know if they decide to submit a protest or not. Friends of Historic Preservation is helping me out a lot by having someone write up the site inventory form, the historic description of the building, so that we can use that.
To do that.
Yeah, they are, which is good. It's just helpful. The research has been done, and then we don't have to do that. So I'm expecting that it'll probably come to the February meeting. In addition, we will also at the February meeting review the annual report. So next month, we will discuss the work plan. So, I'll put something in the agenda about what we've had in the past, and you can talk about what you want to do or what you're interested in trying to work on. So I think that's it. Oh, and I think we'll have Julie Julie will be out of town, but we'll have somebody from the Parks and Rec come and talk about where they are at with City Park Pool next month, I believe, in January.
They'll have updates based on their focus groups.
Yeah, they've had public input, and so they'll do that. And I think after that, they'll start working on kind of other designs. I don't know.
Yeah.
We don't have a purview anymore. We don't have a purview beyond talking about how it's a historic pool and trying to encourage them to save it. And so once that determination is made, we don't have any say in it, but they are coming back because we have requested to talk about that. And the public's interested in the historic nature of the pool. So that's all I have.
All right.
We do need a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Reynolds makes a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Lewis seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.